everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Talk Realness, a podcast where we discuss all nuances concerning education and dance, because a dance experience is an experience worth talking about. I'm your host, Truly B, with my awesome co-host, Daryl P. Hey, boo. How you doing?
Good.
Hey. Today, we will be talking a little bit about how dance is discussed textually. Not only with history books, but I know we're definitely going to start the conversation there with exactly what things are, deemed worthy or not to be in dance textbooks, what things potentially are getting left out, and how the passage of time has the impact on that. But before we do all of that, today's quote is from Toni Morrison. And she says, if there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. Which is appropriate for today's topic.
That is appropriate for today's topic.
Look, I be on brand sometimes with these quotes. Other times, though, it'd be like, we out here, but on brand, I approve. Yes. So with that actually in mind, so this idea of there's so many things, like, in general history books that get left out.
Oh, as we have seen.
Facts. So there's no doubt, like it just cannot be any doubt that once you start getting into more specific topics, that it's almost like trickle down effect, like the same thing is happening, that there's so much history that is cut out when we're talking about dance.
Right.
So, I always refused to use the history books that the school system provided because I'm like, this is trash. Like, you're not talking about nothing. And the things you are talking about, first of all, I'm questioning some of this accuracy, but I want to use this. I don't think this is beneficial for the population I teach. So since you have more current interaction with books that are being used to educate our youth, I want to hear from you first, and I'll pop in.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you that I think there's a lot of things that get left out. And like we were just saying before we, initiated the conversation about how, at least in like history books, once you create and curate material to be put into a history book, and I say curate, like you should be like selecting what is in the history book. Once you compile and you write these history books, once they go to the printer and are printed, they're already outdated because between the time it went to print and the time it's published and accessible, new things have developed, right, in history and in time. And I feel like, that's really what happens in dance. I think dance is, in dance history books and dance technique books and dance teaching books, like this will be a chapter. Like these last 8 months will be a chapter, could potentially be a course in, what people will study about the art of dance and being able to instruct virtually. I think that this has definitely changed the game on how we educate our students, and then also how we educate our dance educators as well. I think that when I think about technique books, like you were saying, I just never, like when you think about the history and what they're describing and what they're saying, I've always kind of questioned some of the accuracy, especially when you get into dance and then after the 1920s. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's very credible to like the minstrel shows and like definitely dance kind of beyond that, like, you know, in the 1800s. But it's like that 1900s dance where things start being misappropriated, where I think people start seeing things and manipulating, and it's like, well, they call it this. It's called the twist, but we're gonna call it the spin. You know what I mean? And it's like, like you know what I mean? Like that's where you start kind of getting all these different things. Like, oh, it's called this, but really we call it this. But what we call it now is what really is like what everybody knows and like what's written in the history books. But you don't really get to see or learn about like where a lot of these things originated. You know what I mean? And that's probably across the board, especially in the arts of like with music and dance and just art in general, you know, visual art. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100% that idea of, okay, so this is what it is, but this is what I'm gonna call it. So we're gonna go with this thing that I'm saying. And now I am now the mother of whatever form and I'm the creator of it. And it's like, but there's proof that I'm not. Like, it is verifiable. Like, you can actually run that back and prove that. And I don't like, it's not that I don't think that it occurred prior to that time frame. But like you were saying, it's something right up in there where it starts getting, it's almost like it gets bolder with it. And like, that's not to say that people appropriating things weren't like out here in these streets being bold with it. By far, definitely were. But it's like there was this shift that they were more out here with it, and almost like it became more acceptable, or if not acceptable, just more accepted. That it's just like, well, you know, that's what happens. Like, what you gonna do? And it's like, why is it so hard to just be like, oh, I got this from Daryl?
Right.
Like, then that's it. Now, did I add my own spin to it? Possibly. Did I travel more with it? Possibly. But what exactly is wrong with me giving that credit?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think that I feel like that, I definitely feel like it didn't happen in those, in that early 1900s. I definitely feel like it's happening a little bit better now. Whenever I'm experiencing dance or experiencing like a dance workshop, I definitely feel like that credit is being given. But you know, when these new books and these new techniques and styles or whatever are being developed and coming out and being written about, you know, I wonder how the historians will credit that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we hear so much about the, you know, the Martha Grahams and the Eric Hawkins and you know, the Ted Shawns and you know, the very early pioneers of modern dance. But you know, and we do have a couple of, we have several Black modern dancers, but I feel like you just don't hear about them or read about them in the books up until later on. You know, like when you start thinking about like the 1960s, 1970s, and it's like, I wonder, were there no Black modern dancers prior to that? You know, like was it like a thing that we just didn't study, or we did, but you know, we just didn't have a presence like some of those other dancers, those pioneers, as we call them.
Yeah, like because it's easy to make the assumption that there just weren't any, but that's actually a good question. Like, is it that there actually wasn't, or
Right.
they just didn't get that shot out?
Right.
And I'm like, how do you? I'm not a historian, so I need to learn how to do that type of research. But I'm like, how do you even
begin to look that up?
Yeah, like how do you even find where to start digging?
Right. I mean, we could probably just start from what we know and work our way backwards to try to see like where did you study? But a lot of our prominent Black modern figures studied, quote, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like they studied in a lot of the more predominantly white styles. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know the Lester Horton. Who was Horton's? What's his ethnicity? I know, right?
That smooth be a question I be asking all the time. I should know the answer by now.
Yeah, I should know that too, because I know that is like very Ailey based.
This is why we have technology.
Right. Hello. But and then I even think about too, like, and there was and I think we've talked about this before in one of our episodes about the whiteness of dance programs, right? And not even being introduced to Horton until I went outside of my program and took classes, and that's when I kind of knew. Now, did we study Ailey? Yes, there were definitely. You're looking at the Lester Horton. There you go.
Yeah. So there we go.
So, now that just all of a sudden just starts to bring up so many other things now for me too. But yes, we did look at Revelations. We looked at a lot of different pieces. But like, when I'm thinking about like postmodern dancers, we're looking at like Trisha Brown. We're looking at Twyla Tharp. We're looking at. I feel like I know those names and their background more than what I know of Alvin Ailey. And I don't know. I don't know if that's my own fault, or I mean, I don't want to blame my professors. Like, should I introduce that? Should that have been something that I sought out? Should I have just been like, or should they have been like, no, we want this full, robust education of all things dance, and that includes.
I think both things can be true.
Yeah.
Both you should within yourself be like, you know what, I want to know more about this, more about people who look like me in the field, see what has come before. But also educators, I'm like, yo, could you want a well-rounded education for your students, please?
Right.
Like you can't, I mean, clearly you can because people have done it for forever. But if you genuinely want to educate someone fully, then they need the full picture.
Right.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this. Even if I'm like, okay, I'm gonna say it this way. So I don't get in trouble. So I'm like, okay, Ailey is by far the absolute best dancer, choreographer, modern dance creator, whatever, what have you. Absolute best, no one above him in the world. I'm going to be pushing Ailey like nobody's business while I teach. Cool. In the process of me doing that though, and me, I guess, because to me, when you're just like, well, it's only this person, then you're trying to like brainwash people into that. But neither here nor there, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the process of that, I'm still going to tell you about other people. Now, the issue comes in, because I know how I am, so I know other people do this, is that while I'm telling you about these other folks, I'm painting that picture a specific way.
Right.
So I guess my question is, so how do we ever get to the point that we can have the history told without it being painted through a bias? I don't know that it's even possible, but
yeah, because I'll go on a limb. I have my, because I'm picking up what you're putting down.
yeah.
I will say I have a little bit of a biased opinion about certain styles.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I know that I have a friend who, we studied Hawkins in my undergrad. And I know that the way in which I move and that I choreograph is probably still very Hawkins. But also my own spin on just like the many different things that I have done in my life as a dancer. And that's where I kind of draw a lot of my movement from. But it's probably not the most, I will say it's probably not the most athletic style of dance. And when I say athletic, I mean that Hawkins is all based on injury prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to see a lot of things in Hawkins' movement that's like, let's go from erect to flat back in like 2 counts. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to really strain the body too much in it. But I think through a lot of the movement, it's very fluid, right? You're not going to contract like you just got shocked. Like some other forms of, which is very closely related to Hawkins. But I definitely see the benefit in having those very athletically trained modern forms, right? Mm-hmm. I think I feel like even the modern forms, the way they are kind of written or developed historically, are all kind of like anti one or the other, right? Like Hawkins is kind of the anti-Graham, right? Mm-hmm. And that it's less bound and more flow. So each one just kind of has that take that obviously most of them come out of the other one, right? So I think historically, there should just be, the way they should be written is that there should be an appreciation for one, because obviously you wouldn't have, I feel like all these people studied together, right?
They did, low key.
You know what I mean? Like you were my student. Now you have your own
mm-hmm.
school, but I taught you. You know what I mean? So it's like and that's where I feel like that the history books do a good job of like at least expressing that. But I think whenever you take that history and you put it into the body, you put it into a teacher, you ingrain this into like a campus or like a department, then it just becomes so like tunnel visioned, and the only way is Lamone, and then it's like, well, he studied, like he learned that from somebody else, so give credit for that genre. But yeah, no, I back kind of what your comment, I think it's important to have a very well-rounded dance background, not only just in the, jazz, modern, hip hop, contemporary, ballet, but I think even within the modern, I think there should be you should kind of couple some of those techniques together, and not just study only one, you know, or at least like only prefer to take, like I only prefer to take a Graham class. Like I think there's so much that you could learn about yourself by mixing that Graham with like some Alexander, or mixing that Graham with some Horton, that will just be telling about the body.
Yeah.
And how it moves. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And I've always kind of been on the fence with that, because teaching wise, I very much am of the opinion that you should at least experience more than one style, mm-hmm. and see how they talk to each other, like how your body can communicate through both of them, or, you know, all three, or however many. But then also, and this is because this is how my education was, there is a value in having studied something in particular. Mm-hmm. And like when filling out applications, when typing up your CV and all that, it just, to me maybe, and I know at least in some places I've applied, it just looks better to say, I studied this style. And I think part of the issue, it's not, I don't really want to say issue, because again, it's not that I dislike learning multiple things. Like, I think you should. I think it helps. But it's as though if you, like some people take, oh, we should do multiple things, but they never have you really learn, like, jack of all trades, master of none. Mm-hmm. That I don't like. And that may just be because of how I was raised and how I was taught, because it was the same thing in music for me, like how my teachers taught, that they're like, okay, yeah, because I used to get fussed at because I would play different instruments, and they're like, but did you master one of them? And I'm like, I mean, I'm pretty great. Yeah. Like, what you talking? Like, I'm pretty great at this. Yeah. But I had one director, he used to lay into me. Yeah, I've always just been in trouble. Dang. But he was like, okay, well, I mean, if you can't play this part on your primary instrument, you have no business learning it on something else. Master that. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Now, that being said, because initially I was a music major. That didn't work out. I was like, I'm too lazy for this. I'd much rather just play. I don't want to teach anybody child music. Yeah. But when I was majoring in it, knowing how to play multiple instruments was necessary, because if I don't know how to do this, it's going to make my job that much harder when I'm trying to teach someone else. Or I'm going to be steering students in different directions than where they should be going, because I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. So we're going to be over here where we're doing what I know how to do. Yeah. So I think it is important to have all these different things in your pocket. Mm-hmm. But then something also can be said for having mastered at least one of them. Right. And I think that's the difficulty I have, and that I have had with like how my undergrad education went. Because child, I mean, maybe I can call somebody and ask them, am I tripping? Because from what I recall, there was no set, but you'll know this style. Mm-hmm. It was very much like hodgepodge, and like, okay, well, this one is more reminiscent of Lamont. I love Lamont, but this is more in that vein. Okay, with this is like, okay, this is kind of from Graham, but it's not like Graham. Like I didn't like study Graham, and like I didn't study Lamont. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's like, I don't know how to find that balance, because then once you like choose one, and I think this goes kind of to your point, as a department, if I say, okay, we're doing Lamont though, now is tunnel vision. And even if we have those other outside moments, I don't know that you'll be as open once you've made that executive decision that, but this is what we gonna do. This is where we at. But I don't know that it's feasible to say, okay, we offer all the forms. Choose which one you want to major in.
You want to major in, yeah.
You got to take a little of each, but choose one.
Yeah. But see, with that though, too, though, is like, once again, if my dance professors ever watch this, this is not, I love my experience with Hawkins. And I loved how I move as a person. I think definitely different than other people who I know. I guess it depends on what you want to do post college. And we'll still get this back to, and if you're listening, we'll still get this back to the textbook, because I think this all kind of wraps up into that too.
Yeah.
The last thing I think about when I think about all this stuff about, you know, when we saw the picture of Horton and thinking about, you know, how people studied and how history is written, you know, I always also think about, like, you know, I always, in these textbooks, you know, when they start to get to like Twyla Tharp and like I said, Alvin Ailey and Savion Glover and like all these like more like, and like Misty Copeland, like, then I start to think about, well, who's like the next generation of artists, right? And what they will look like, being that we don't have these dance schools, but we can talk about that later. Let's put a pin in that. But what I wanted to say about my experience with my dance program is that you're right. Focusing on one thing is great. But it also depends on, like I said, what you want to do after college, because there really isn't like a large traveling Hawkins base anymore, right? I wouldn't say it's a dying art form. It's an art form that only a pocket of people know. You know what I mean? So which is an advantage, right? Like, it's an advantage because not everybody is out there studying it. So like, when you say I know it, I guess maybe it could give you a leg up, right? Whereas like, if you're going to like a very Graham-based school, well, there's still a Martha Graham school. There's still Martha Graham company, right? Same with if you study Horton. I feel like though there are certain modern forms that are still very marketable for you post college, right? So I guess like I was just thinking, like, it depends on what you want to do post college as to what you study while you're there, right? Like, if you're looking to perform, and let's say, I don't know, there's a certain, like for me, if I was looking to perform and my art form or my college department focused heavily on Hawkins, right? Like whereas I would honestly just have to get just really good at Hawkins and just go that Hawkins route, or I would feel like I would need to definitely study something else, like I was saying, a little bit more athletic, to be able to compete with other dancers doing like Horton or Graham.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think like we had a guest who definitely did an MFA at a school, and I think that I wouldn't say that he is, I'm giving him away. I wouldn't say that he is anti-Hawkins, but I definitely think that he, and I don't know, I don't want to speak for him and put words into his mouth, but I think that there's a strong value in the there's a greater value in the things that he learned, I think, in his graduate program. That yes, he was able to take a lot of the things he learned in undergrad, but I think where he really got a bulk of it was at his undergrad or at his graduate program, where the art form was a little bit more athletic. So yes, I think you should master one, but I think you should be very cautious about make sure you're mastering the one that you feel like for you is that you will make you the most marketable in whatever profession you want to do. As a teacher, teaching artist, teaching dance educator, I think Hawkins is great for me, like especially with all of the, like I said, the injury prevention. I think the amount of care that you take for your body, because I feel like when I start to teach other forms like ballet and jazz and hip hop, I think I come from a place where I'm not trying to we're not doing jump splits in the air, jazz routines, right? And if we are, we're going to do it in a way that hopefully will be very protective of the body, right? So everything, all of my other genres come with like a little bit of care for the body in that regard. So yeah, for me, it's very helpful. I feel like maybe if I wanted to be a performer, I probably would have wanted to study something else, which I did get a chance to do some performance work, and that took me kind of going out and like making sure I knew other forms, other art forms. Back to what I was saying before, kind of like the bow is, what will the history books say about dancers today? Who will be the choreographers that, our great grandchildren will learn about?
Yeah.
And what will their experiences be like?
That's a good question. And it's like, what are because I would say that primarily, if you make it into the books, then you made some form of a major contribution, be it for good or be it for ill, but you did something major.
Right.
So that is a good question. Like, cause even like when, like my kids get, like the younger ones, when they get old enough, like in college, like a dance history course for them is going to be completely different from what someone in college now is studying, which is different from what I was studying.
Right.
And I wonder, in the process of, because, history's always happening. It's always taking place. In the process of that, though, at what point do you start saying, okay, well, we can skip this now because now we have this information? So I guess an example we can say, I don't know, who's a modern pioneer now? I don't even know if pioneer is the correct term to use at this point, but someone who contributes greatly
to modern dance. Well, I don't know if I would call it modern dance. I would just say contemporary dance. The one that comes to mind that I was just thinking of was Mia Michaels.
Facts. So is there ever a point where in the books they make the decision that, you know what, we're going to talk about Mia Michaels and not Martha Graham? Like, do we get to that point? Because I feel like we do get to that point. Like, and I'm otherwise the book's never going to end. Like, you'll never be done. You'll never be able to publish it. But it's like,
well, Yeah, and it's so interesting because how, I look at some of these history of dance books and it's like everybody from 1990 to today are like paragraphs about their tradition. Yet, Martha Graham is getting like, at least 3 or 4 pages,
Yeah.
just of all the work that she's done and all the, I mean, was her contribution big? Of course. I don't want to like downplay that. But, well, it also makes me think like, are we just not contributing enough now?
That might be a thing.
That might be a thing. Are we not contributing enough to the art of dance to make us notable, right? Like, dance is just so different now, and it is so accessible to a lot more people than what it was in Martha Graham days, right? Like, we have it we have it in almost every school.
Yeah.
You have it on television. You have it on your phones through apps. So, I had a student who sent me an email and just said that I have this video that I want you to see. It's this choreographer. He does this dance. I learned it over the summer. Maybe you could show this to or teach this to your upper level classes, which I thought was really sweet because she's fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great dance. But, it's like these kids can get dance from YouTube. They're just, I mean, they may not be getting that training, but it's like, I don't know. It's I remember my first episode on here where I talked about kind of like my dance journey and how like my dance journey didn't start by formal training.
Yeah.
It started off by seeing people dance and mimicking and kind of saying, okay, that's cool. I kind of want to learn how to do that. And then it went into the formal training. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how history will present ourselves, how history will present us, right? Like as artists and choreographers and dancers and educators, like what will be our big contribution?
Like, I'm tempted to start believing that, at least when referencing back to this phase of dance, that whoever is really making leaps and bounds technologically with dance, that those might be names that come up. Now, that being said, though, I do mean beyond like, oh, they offered a lot of online classes, or like they showed more of their footage online. Like, not that, but like really integrating the two and pushing it forward, of which I don't know that anyone has done like major leaps and bounds with that yet, but if not, is definitely coming, because that's just kind of the environment that we're in. And I wanted to say too, so to your point of like how like the more recent artists, like they'll have like maybe, if they're lucky, a paragraph. I've seen some that it was just a few listed in a paragraph, and it's like, dang, y'all just really did them, like you did them dirty. That is rude. Yeah. And then you got Graham, who got like a whole chapter to herself, and not to shortchange her, of course, but maybe the shift becomes that she no longer gets that chapter, and we start truncating the earlier, I don't know, whichever word we want to use there, whatever, and start giving more credit to the dancers who are at least within, I don't know, 20 to 30 years of where we are, at least. But
did you realize 20 years is the 2000s?
Yo, can we talk about it? Because in my mind, 10 years ago was still the 90s. So right, exactly. I really...
30 years ago was the 90s. Like that's
Yo. So, oh my God. Okay. So pause on that then.
yeah. Let's just pause and just like say
Wow.
about why are we so old?
Yes. Like legit. I'm like, I just graduated.
Okay, well, for real, let's even think about that too. Who would you dedicate an entire chapter to in a dance book? It could be history or technique.
Mm-hmm.
That is from 1990 to today. That is still doing something. I'm thinking with you, and I can't think of anybody.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, well, there we go.
Yeah, right. And it's like,
Dang. 1990 was 30 years ago.
yeah. And I can think of some people who I know who have been doing stuff in that time, but I just don't know if other people like. It's a smaller. It seems like the circles, or maybe the circle is so saturated, right? That like nobody is like
a standout.
the standout, right? Like we're all like these branches growing together. So like it's just like you just have this hodgepodge of branches, right? But not one branch is like ahead of the other. But it's like, I think of there's a guy out of New York, Doug Barone. I don't know if he is doing stuff. There's two professors at University of Maryland that had a company out of New York, Patrice Woodrig and Sarah Pearson. They were doing stuff in the 90s and early 2000s before they decided just to go into education. But like, it's like, I guess it starts to be where like, we carry those histories, right? Like we carry those names, but like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I want to kind of walk over because my history books are all over there. I mean, they probably had to have been published in the last couple of years. They still just die off.
Yeah.
For like the 90s, but like I said, it's like the small like here's a list of people. That you could go look up if you ever feel the need to look up these people, but it's not the big chapter heavy hitters like we see.
Now, do you think that part of that could be, I guess, the way dance is viewed, the way it's consumed now? I mean, I don't know. I just feel like people were more likely to go see dance way back, or it was more of actually it was more of a privilege. Pause that. Yeah. So there we go. But it just seemed like there was like those people came about at a time where, again, I don't feel like being a dancer was ever seen as like really a respectable position, at least in the States. Like, I feel like you might have always gotten the side eye for that. But it was more, I don't know, more something. I don't even know what word goes in there, but where we are now, like, because dancers are always talking about, like, well, how do we pull in more audiences? Like, how do we like connect with the audience? How do we get people like to come out and see everything? And I am just making the assumption that way back in the 1900s, wasn't that far back, but okay, way back then, that maybe that particular struggle didn't exist.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. But you know what I was just thinking? I was thinking like, what is it about Broadway that has just, just having watched Hamilton like over the summer, just a couple of years ago, I for my birthday, I bought myself a season tickets to a Broadway, to like a Broadway package where I saw like 6 shows for a whole year.
Mhm.
What is it about Broadway that still gets people there in the seats in the theater, but yet people want to do that for dance?
Okay, so this is maybe not the best way to say it, but the first thing that popped in mind, I was like, you don't have to think as much. It's easier to consume. Like, if I'm going to see a Broadway show, I more than likely already know that there's going to be a storyline, and it's also the spectacle of it. Because you have the music, you have at least some of them, you have dancing, you have the costumes, you have the backdrops. Like, there's a lot, but it's also easier to consume because you know they're gonna be talking about something.
Right.
And I think, because I would argue um, that if people taking like privilege out of it and all that type of stuff as much as you can. But I feel like even like today, people will be more likely to possibly sit through like a ballet than like a modern concert. Because at
Right.
least with the ballet, like if it's like a traditional story ballet, like you know the story. So you're just following the story and you're just watching them dance the story, but you can follow that. Um, Modern stuff don't really be having a story sometimes, or it does, but it's more abstracted and you have to put in some type of mental effort
Mhm.
to connect. And even then, when you're like, okay, well, it's about blah blah blah, that may not actually be what it's about. That's just how you interpreted it.
Mhm.
um Whereas with, if I'm watching Swan Lake,
Mhm.
now that story is that story, and all the versions of it that I've seen, I'm like, but you still got a pretty consistent story happening here. Like, I can follow point A to point B to point C. And so I think that plays a big role, which I love Broadway. Broadway's awesome. But and it's
Yeah.
not to
I do too.
cheapen
I do too.
that, but it's just easier for the general person.
Right. And I was just thinking too, because I was what came to mind was Martha Graham's Appalachian Spring,
Hmm.
and how that was the sound for that was composed by Aaron Copland,
Hmm.
but it was composed specifically for her piece. And I wonder if, like, when you have such a name like Aaron Copland, right, who's like making this piece, right, like if I were to have like, I don't know, Thomas Newman. I'm trying to think of like one of those big name movie composers.
Oh, John Williams. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
yeah. Compose for. I feel like maybe as dancers, we're not reaching across the aisle, to our brothers and sisters in the other art forms to really say, hey, let's collaborate on this. You have a huge name. My name is not as huge, but I want it to be huge, or I do have a huge name and I want you to compose this for me. Um, let's work together to compose this piece, right? And have
Yeah.
it this be this big premiere, in LA or in New York or in DC or wherever, um, for this show, to get people out there. Could you imagine if, like, I don't know, who's a music a composer that's really popular with like kids? Like
I was
someone
gonna
that
say
really,
Danny Elfman, but again, we're in like 2020.
right.
I need to get in this millennium,
You
child.
know, I mean, yeah, I don't know any like composers, but like just imagine like having someone who just like not an art like a musical artist, but like a composer of
Yeah.
music, like write something specifically for. I feel like I haven't heard that happen in a while, and maybe that could. I mean, I'm sure it's expensive. I'm sure it takes a lot of time. That I feel like maybe as dance artists we don't have a whole lot of time for. Like it's probably easier to take an already made track
Yeah.
and perform to it as opposed to like commissioning something, waiting for it to be written, or like even having the composer come and see your process and then go back and create and whatnot. Like I'm sure that's a long process, but
I think it would be
uh,
worth it though.
I think it would be worth it. Yeah, that's a grant. I think that would be a really cool grant for just a grant just to get someone to compose for you,
Mm-hmm.
like a really well known person, just to kind of reach out and to say, hey, how much would you pay? How much would you charge to compose something, and then write a grant for it?
More
And
people need to do that.
yeah,
Because like you're saying, like I feel like that used to be like the thing.
mm-hmm,
And because I was randomly doing research for something completely different,
mm-hmm,
not really dance related at all, but I'd be trying to like tie it back in because I need sanity.
mm-hmm,
And it would be the big choreographer, big composer, a
mm-hmm.
big artist, because somebody is designing these backdrops
Right.
and these
Yeah.
costumes.
Mm-hmm.
And like I learned in 2020, I don't know how I didn't learn this in undergrad in dance history. I am confused. Maybe we skipped that chapter. I don't know. But Picasso was out here designing backdrops and costumes for ballets.
I think I knew that, but I don't. But I don't know enough about it. I don't. I can tell you which one he did it for.
I'll
But I
have to look
thought,
it back up because that
yeah,
information has left. But I'm like, we should do more collaborations.
yeah. I
That
think
should be a thing.
that should be way much. That should be a bigger thing. Is always looking for collaboration. And I think that I don't know where we stopped doing that. Where did we become an art form where we were like,
Like, I got it.
we can do this ourselves.
We're alone.
You
And we
know,
want to be like, nah, B, nah. Can
no,
we
no.
collaborate, please? Let's work
Yeah, I
together.
think we definitely need more collaboration between the art forms to like, and that's the cool thing that I think why I get excited for about my classes,
Mm-hmm.
so like having like I have a production class, is that like there's room for the students to kind of collaborate creatively, in like assuming roles and saying, okay, you're the one who has to kind of help decide and plan this. But even wanting to reach across, even my own aisles here and like work with my music teacher, and work with my choir teacher to um, really create some interesting projects.
You know what? So, had the idea
Mm-hmm.
of why dance, and speaking broadly, would be like, nah, we got this because everyone else does. Like, you can have a whole music concert and have nobody else there. You can have an artist showing work in a gallery. Nothing else is there but that
Mm-hmm.
artwork.
Right.
But then dance, it was like, oh, there's like, you have to have music and you have to have these costumes designed and you have to have like we can't survive on our own, quotation fingers. And
Mm-hmm.
so me being me, I would very much be like, bet. I can do it without all of y'all.
Right.
No issue. So maybe there was a break at some point, because I've always been down to work with like colleagues.
Mm-hmm. But they're not always.
They're not always. And also, people wouldn't say it, but I'm like, I know for a fact you don't think my field is at the level that yours is. I can tell by how you're addressing me and how you reference the dance portion of things.
Right.
You don't think we're as good.
Well, but I think that I don't know if we've talked about this, but this could also be another thing is I think when you have all these shows, like, so you think you can dance and World of Dance and then dance on YouTube, dance on TikTok, I feel like we almost cheapen our art form a little bit because we make it too accessible for people. So it's like, what do I need to take a dance class for when I can learn this dance on YouTube and do it just as good as somebody who's taking class all the time? You know what I mean? But it's like, but what I will say though, is that, you know, obviously the true value of a dance education, you know, is unmatched to anybody who just have just gone online and just learn a couple of dances and maybe they do a little bit here and there. Like, you know, there is that competitiveness that's come from really studying, you know, it's becoming the master, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I don't know, maybe we've become too accessible to people where, like, you know, I can't pick up an instrument and just play it. Someone has to teach me how to do it. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't just pick up a paintbrush and paint a picture and someone just says, oh, that's art, I'm gonna buy it. But, you know, I can do a line dance that I learned at a bar or a club, and someone thinks, oh, you dance. Mm-hmm. You're a dancer.
Yep. And
it's like,
find this differently.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't call you a dancer. But I think it also, but on the flip side of that, I think it draws more people to our art form than I think any other art form out there. People, I feel like it's one of those things where I feel like I, knock on wood, I love my job. And I appreciate all my other art forms out there. But I also feel like, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself, I just feel like I never worry about my numbers in my classes. Like, I don't worry about, oh my God, am I going to have enough students who want to take my class? I'm going to always have students that are going to want to take this class. You know, it's granted arguing and fighting to make sure they're in the right classes so they're in the right level. Because that's the other thing that also gets me is that, you know, it's not like dance class is a dance class. It doesn't matter if it says dance 1 or dance 4. And I'm like, oh no, there's a difference. That's why there's a number behind it. But
big facts though. Like, no, these are different classes.
They're very different classes. But I never worry about that because I feel like I know that people are always going to want to engage dance because it is accessible and people feel like, you know, I can attempt to do this. And you kind of get to a point too, especially like in high school, you know, if you've never picked up an instrument in a day in your life, you're a freshman in high school, like, what are you doing trying to be a trumpet player? You know what I mean? I mean, that's just me.
Maybe I've known those people though.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Like, this is your first time, or like you've never sang before and you're like, you know what, freshman year, I'm gonna be in choir. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's like,
You know, and I think that that's something also here, another side note, that's also something here in Maryland that I think is so weird. Because now, granted, we don't have dance in all the middle schools in Texas, but there is choir and band in all middle schools, all high schools. And there's a big connection between the two. there's a lot of talk and collaboration between the two that you would just never, like, if you have enough people to fill a middle school band, and you have several middle school coming to one high school, there's no reason why your high school band isn't like 60, 80 deep. You know what I mean? Year after year. Plus, you know what I mean? And so I just don't understand that, like, how do kids like do this in middle school and then drop it in high school, right? If there's just isn't like a connection that you see, like, why would I want to do that in high school? I don't know. That's just me.
I will say, and I will say this carefully. I mean, I don't think the person I'm talking about listens, but we know a lot of the same people. So part of it, from what I've seen, is it may just be that person drops the ball. Like, if I've had like a great experience with band all through middle school, which was not my testimony. Let me say that. It was trash at the end of middle school. Yeah. But great experience. And then I get to high school and you on some old BS, I'm not going to want to be there. Like, I will find a way that if I still want to play, there's a community something, there's a lesson somewhere I can get what I need if I see you on that old BS. And the issue is for people like that even if you try to get it together, once you've made yourself that reputation of you on that old BS, that's what the messages that get sent out. And so people already know coming into the school that, man, I ain't gonna join that class. I ain't gonna be in band. Right. It's all right.
Yeah.
But I will say for dance, and I think that this was a disconnect for other fields in understanding us, is first, and I don't understand this. This confuses me. I've heard parents say it for the other arts, but not so much for dance, that once they get to high school, it's like, okay, they need to focus on their studies. Your child can't do more than one thing. I mean, if they can't, that's your kid. Hey, but I've known a lot of musicians who top scholars, usually the artist kids got them grades. It's usually, it's usually us. Like, it's us.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is about dance. And I feel like there's some piece in like what you were saying with like the accessibility that is feeding into it, but I cannot pinpoint it yet. But there is something about us that once they get to a certain age, it's like, all right, we can't focus on this no more. And it's like, but why? Like, you 100% can still have your grades up. You can still participate in other things. You can still get scholarships. And I don't know why people be acting like scholarships aren't an option. You can still have an entire career path.
Right.
Like, it boggles my mind. And, my children do benefit because they come from two artist parents. So I'd be like, but you're going to be in this class. Definitely working on convincing one child to stay in Horton classes. Because I was like, but you're good at it. And she's like, nah. And I'm like, but you should be in there until I say stop, because I want you to benefit from it while you can. But like when their grades, because like this transition to middle school was trash around here. And where a lot of, and I saw this like in the studio, parents like, okay, well, until she gets her grades up, we're not bringing her up here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, first of all, tuition gonna still be due. What you're not doing is missing a single class that I paid for. I can't abide by that wastefulness, because classes ain't cheap.
Right.
And I mean, they're reasonably priced. However, my child definitely takes more than one class. So I'm just like, I pay too much for you to miss anything. But I have been known to say, okay, so look, if you have not already set like spacing, they can smooth not be put in this piece. They still got to come. They still have to go through all the technique portion. They still got to learn that choreography. They ain't got to be in your dance stuff. Like, I want all the salt in your wound. I want you to never forget how crazy I am and that I will ruin your life. I will make you go to the class knowing you're never going to perform. No shame. And so I'm like, I have a different mindset, because I'm like, at the end of the day, even if they never perform, that is still a skill set that can come in handy later. Right. That can get them some money later. So to me, and I'm not knocking anyone else's parenting style, but to me, it is stupid to not continue to push them in a field that they have shown. So now, if your kid can't dance, and you know when your kid can't dance, I don't know, people be acting like their kids are like great. And I'm like, we looking at the same kid? They look terrible. They don't know right from left. They can't count to 2. So you talk about an 8-count phrase, baby, they lost. In those instances, maybe pull them. That's fine. That's okay. Not to be like that, but also to be like that. Like, you pull that kid. Right. But it's always, from my experience, it's always been the kids who are like really talented.
That their parent,
And it's like, we're going to focus on our studies. Shouldn't you have been focused on your studies?
Right.
But maybe that's me. Maybe I just believe my child should be well-rounded instead of a little robot and trying to live vicariously through them because I didn't have the opportunities to do X, Y, Z.
Right.
But maybe that's me. I'm just saying. Yeah. But to tie it back into books, we just be out here. It's fine. Yeah. But I will say, actually, perfect tie-in is that I don't think that people realize just how much learning takes place in dance, that it goes beyond they're just moving their body to music or to whatever, that there's so much more that gets covered, and be that through learning the history, be that through learning the technique, all of it. And to tie back to something we talked about a while back, that idea of 100% people should offer like history courses. Like, you should be able to take a specific history course that count for your history credit. Because regular American history course was garbage for me in college. And I was like, I hate it here. I don't want to do this. But if y'all would have like legit had like a for real dance in America from 1900 to 2000, whatever, and that was my history course, I'm paying attention at that point. So, but again, things have been done one way for so long that people think that that's just the way that it's supposed to be done. I'm like, no, that's just how it's been done. That doesn't mean that it's the right way to do it, and it doesn't mean that we can't change it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Awesome. So thank you for the topic. And I'm sure it'll come up again because things are always happening. And particularly, I know y'all always be getting new books at random.
Yeah.
So I know it's going to come back. It'll circle back. It'll come back. And you actually gave me some more ideas and some things. So yes. So thanks to all of you guys out there for joining us again here at Dance Talk Realness. Please make sure to like, comment, follow, subscribe, all the things that you can do across all the platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts. I know I keep saying I'm going to add some other ones, and I think I found the link. And I think last episode when you weren't with us, Daryl, that I was like, Daryl's going to help me. So you're going to help me. So yes, working on it. If you have any questions for us, please be sure to leave them under the Facebook or Instagram or YouTube post. any of those places are great. And we'll be sure to get back to you. And we look forward to bringing you some fresh new content next week. See you then. Bye.